Excellent. Great. Thanks so much, Liz. Welcome, everybody, to the League of American Bicyclists and Alliance for Biking and Walking webinar on Vine, Instagram, Pinterest, and Tumblr 101. So this is a part of a webinar in a series of webinars that our organizations have been doing together about social media and how they can be useful for biking and walking advocacy. I'm Mary Lauren Hall, Communications Director for the Alliance for Biking and Walking. And Liz, do you want to introduce yourself too?
Yeah, thanks. This is Liz Murphy. I'm the Communications Manager at the League of American Bicyclists. Thanks everyone for being here.
Yeah, thanks for joining us. So we're going to go through 4 social networks that aren't the ones that are necessarily most often talked about, but are kind of new on the scene and growing, and can be super useful for advocacy campaigns or just for having more of a presence on the social web. So we'll be going through these 4 different social networks. We've also had separate webinars on Facebook 101 and Twitter 101, and you can find links to those on both the Alliance blog and the League blog if you want to go back and review that content. So here's an overview of what we're going to cover today. Start off with Instagram, then go to Tumblr, and then Pinterest, and then Vine. And then we'll talk a little bit about how you as an organization or as an individual can decide which of the networks to use and sort of what permutation to focus on. Let's start off with Instagram. Just a bit of an overview. Instagram is a social network it's relatively new on the scene. It's a very photocentric social network. It's based around sharing simple photos and videos. As of, I think, about a year and a half ago, Instagram is now owned by Facebook. The reason that's important to mention, I think, is that Instagram, in a lot of ways, is much more friendly with integrating with Facebook and talking to Facebook than it is in talking to Twitter, because Facebook and Twitter don't get along all that well. It's a pretty smartphone and tablet dependent social network, so you can only post to it from an Android phone or an iPhone or an iPad or a tablet device. There's no way currently to upload photos from a web browser, from a laptop or computer. In terms of demographics, Instagram skews young, female, and urban. So if you're looking to make inroads in those communities, it's a good network to be on. And the basic parlance around Instagram is pretty similar to Twitter in that a person who uses it or an organization who uses it has their own handle. That would be kind of the username, and the username starts with an @ symbol, like an email address. And when uploading photos and commenting on photos, people can use hashtags to categorically sort by the things that the photo is about or references. So here's a basic overview of how Instagram actually works. This is a screenshot of my phone. Instagram has a photo taker portion of the app, and when you click on the app, this is, or the photo taking part, this is what you would see. So you go ahead and take a picture, and then you have the capacity to choose these different filters that you can apply to the image to kind of make it look more interesting or pretty or vintage or whatever. It also gives you a few other options, like dealing with contrast, making it look like a tilt-shifted photo, like it's fuzzy in certain places, giving it a border, and either straightening out the photo or kind of tilting it one way or the other. And here's what that photo looks like after I put a tilt shift on it, made it so it's kind of like focused in the center and fuzzy around the edges, and I put this filter called Amaro on it. Then the next screen that you see after you decide on a filter for your photo is to sort of add a description to the photo itself. So this will show up as kind of a caption within the network. In this case, I put working on a webinar about Instagram. So, and with this hashtag here, much like Twitter, if you're to click on that hashtag once it's uploaded, you would see a bunch of other photos that people have hashtagged with Instagram. You'll notice that you also have options here to add your photo automatically to various different social networks. So if you have your Facebook account connected, or if you have your Twitter account connected, or your Tumblr account connected, you can have it automatically upload to those networks. And then this is my home screen. Um, you can see at the bottom, these little icons here indicate the kind of the home, the map, the camera, the heart button, and the kind of ID card. They indicate the various different areas within the app that you can go to. And this is the home screen. And this is how my photo that I took shows up to other people who follow me on Instagram. And if I were to scroll down here, I would see a bunch of other photos shared by the people that I follow. So a bit on the demographics here. It's a pretty, like I said, it's a pretty young social network. 90% of its 150 million users are under the age of 35, and 68% of those users are female. There isn't really a device bias here about there's a 50-50 split between people who use Instagram on Android devices versus Apple devices. And there's a bit of an urban skew too. So 17% of adults who are on it are in urban areas compared to only 11% in suburban or rural. And the reason I included this picture on the left here, so this is my niece, Sabrina, and if she were on the webinar, I think she'd probably be very embarrassed right now. She's 13 years old, and unlike Facebook and Twitter, all of her friends are on Instagram. I think literally everyone that she knows at school is on Instagram. And you'll notice she has 124 likes on this photo, which is kind of a way of showing your love for the person who took the picture that you're looking at. And that's more likes than like any other photo that I've ever posted on Instagram has ever gotten. And it's because her and her friends are just constantly on Instagram and constantly liking each other's pictures. So if youth engagement is important for a project that you're working on or important for your organization, and kind of getting the word out with visual representation is going to be an important part of that. Like if you're working in schools, maybe on bike education, then Instagram might be the way to go, because you have really, really high numbers of kind of teens and younger adults on the network. Let's talk about a few different examples. If you were to decide that you wanted to see whether being on Instagram was a good choice for your organization or for your effort, I would suggest that a first step is to log on, choose a handle that reflects the name of your organization. It's great if it's the same name as your Twitter account, and then start following a few people who are in the realm of what you're working on. WABA DC, which is the Washington Area Bicyclists Association based right here in Washington, DC, has a great Instagram account. This is one of my favorite photos that they've posted with a woman wearing a helmet, thanking drivers for sharing the road. Another wonderful organization in our network, Bike Pittsburgh, is also on Instagram. This is a picture of the Women in Biking zine that they just released, I think with some involvement from the league's women bike program. And then also Walk San Francisco is on Instagram, and they post great photos from walking around the city, from public meetings, and this is sort of a tabling or an outreach event that they were doing. You can tell that they've added lots of hashtags here, so that folks who are kind of trolling around Instagram or browsing around will be able to discover their account. And there are a few other organizations that I think are doing a really good job on Instagram and are sort of larger national organizations, but are worth taking a look at to kind of learn and see what they're doing. Oceana is one such organization. You can see they're celebrating the fact that some new coral is on an environmental protection list in the Mediterranean, and taking a beautiful picture of coral and then putting their caption on top of it to sort of indicate what happened and why this is important, and to slap their logo on there is a great way to share with their followers sort of a recent victory. Another one to look at, this is an interesting organization. It's called To Write Love on Her Arms, and it's a nonprofit that works on awareness around suicide prevention and self-hurt prevention. And the reason I bring it up, I mean, you can see that over 2,000 people have liked this organization, and it's I bring it up because they do a lot of work in high schools and with education and high school students. And they've done a really good job of cultivating a following among the kids that at the schools that they go do education in. And then, you know, they then spread their work to other people who follow along with their work. So definitely worth taking a look at. And I'd also recommend, if you're using Instagram for your organization, signing up for a Statigram account. Statigram is a good way to track your metrics on Instagram, and also to make sure that all of your photos are compiling in one place. So that if you upload a photo and then 3 months later, maybe it's pushed way down towards the bottom of your feed and it's kind of hard to pull up on Instagram, it'll be much easier to find on Statigram. And you're able to do things like tracking your likes and tracking your comments and your followers and who you're following. And then this is a relatively new thing. Instagram now has video. So I'll go ahead and switch over to my web browser. Here's a picture of a sort of a snapshot of what Walk SF has done, Walk San Francisco. You'll notice that Instagram has actually built up a really nice web viewer, so you can kind of view other people's other organizations' accounts on the web pretty nicely, but you're still not able to upload photos. Here's that organization I was talking about, to write love on her arms. And here's an example of an Instagram video that I really like. So this is an organization called Heal the Bay Santa Monica, and they had a big cleanup day on the beach, and with a bunch of different activities, and then filmed this little video of some kids running around, which is a great way to kind of share what you're working on. You know, taking a video of your volunteers saying why they're excited to be out and handing out lights for a light give out day, or a video of bikers riding along a new bike lane in a city would be a great thing to broadcast on Instagram. You can upload videos of up to 15 seconds, so it's a pretty small snapshot, just really small and bite-sized, which means it's pretty quick to make, and just gives a little glimpse into your work. So you get back to the presentation here. So some things to try out if you think that Instagram might be a good choice for your organization. I would say if you have one person, whether it's a really engaged volunteer or a staff member or a board member, one person who's really excited and is pretty smartphone fluent or tablet fluent, who would be jazzed to be an Instagrammer for the organization, give it over to them and have them do some research into what's going on in your area, whether people are using Instagram in your area. And then if it seems like it's a good fit, then start playing around and give that person ownership of the account, and then have scheduled check-in times where you can see how things are going and whether you're getting engagement. If you do decide to go with it, you could post vintage photos on Throwback Thursday, #TBT for short. You could post pictures of your old logo, or pictures of your executive director when they were a kid riding a bike, or a picture that a member sends in of themselves riding a bike in the city when they were kids. If you have an event like a Bike to Work Day, or a press conference or an advocacy event, you could publicize a hashtag and encourage people who are attending to use that hashtag on Instagram. And then using Statigram, you can go back and see all the photos that were tagged with that hashtag, and then use those photos in report backs or blog posts about the event. This is definitely something that the League of American Bicyclists has done really well with the National Bike Summit in the past. You can also run a photo contest on Instagram, which is something that Bicycling Magazine did earlier this year. Here's an example of a Throwback Thursday post. This is from Katie Couric, and she posted a picture of herself doing gymnastics when she was doing a show on female athletes. So I'd like to pause here and ask whether there are any questions on the stuff that we've covered so far.
And everyone who's tuned in, You can feel free to type in questions as we go along. I will be stopping after each section to handle any questions you have. You can type those questions into the question box on your webinar panel, control panel there. Um, Not seeing any right now, but if you want to wait a moment and see if anything comes in and then move on.
Yep, sounds good. Oops. I found this GIF today that I'm really excited about. Obama in a classroom raising his hand, as if he would need to raise his hand.
Know it all. Okay, so here we have a question from Andy. Marilyn, how do you find sites or users to follow or browsing through users? How do you find people that you want to include in your feed?
That's a great question. I would say that these people are good folks to start with. Um, when you're in the Instagram app, along the bottom of this screenshot from my phone, there's kind of a symbol that looks like a map, kind of like a compass rose on a map. And if you're in that section of the app, you can type in things that are relevant to your interests. Like you could type bike or walk or bike lane or bicycle or what have you. And then photos will come up that are tagged with those words, and I believe that you'll also see users that have those words in their handles and in their descriptions. Um, so you could search according to that. I'd also suggest searching with your community's name to see if there are like your local news outlet or reporters or people who are in the community who ride a bike or who walk. Those are good folks to follow. Um, I'd also say keep a lookout on, if your organization's on Twitter, keep a lookout on Twitter. If people who you follow are posting links to their Instagram videos, then you can go ahead and follow them on Instagram in addition to Twitter.
Great. And kind of related to that question, so this question from Martel in Vermont. Just getting started out, how do you recommend building up your user base and your followers?
That's a great question. Um, I would say following a lot of other people is a really good way to start. Um, Regularly logging in and liking other people's photos and commenting on their photos is a good way to kind of make yourself known. Um, so that's one, kind of following other people and sharing the love in hopes that they'll come and follow you back. Um, Making sure you're sharing really engaging content, like pretty pictures of bikes in your community, or engaging pictures of stuff that's happening in your advocacy organization's world, or in the work that you're working on. Another thing is to make sure that if you have a website, to make sure that your Instagram is linked to on your website, so that folks know that you're on Instagram. You could do fun things like featuring roundups of latest Instagram posts on your blog to get the word out that you're on Instagram. Um, and when you're at events, especially events where people will be taking pictures, like a ride or ribbon cutting, you can encourage people uh, to to use a certain hashtag on Instagram, um, and also include your Instagram handle and encourage them to follow you. So like if you have a printed out program, for example, for Bike to Work Day, you could say, follow WABA DC on Instagram.
Awesome. Um, we have a couple questions that center around the same sort of theme. So I'm sure there are already organizations out there that have accounts over several different networks: Instagram, Twitter, Facebook. Marilyn, how do you decide what to post where? And when
Mm.
is it a good idea to ever post the same thing across all accounts? What's your suggestion on that?
Absolutely. I am a big believer in repurposing content across multiple different venues to the extent that it makes sense. So I know that's a confusing answer, and let me break that down. Um, if you're sharing gorgeous photos on your Instagram, there's no reason you shouldn't also be tweeting out those gorgeous photos, and there's no reason you shouldn't also be putting those gorgeous photos on your Facebook. And if you also have a Tumblr, there's no reason you shouldn't be putting those gorgeous photos on your Tumblr also. Um, the caveat is, and well, and that's because different people use different social networks in different volumes. So you might have one supporter who's super involved on Tumblr or super involved on Instagram, but never touches Twitter or never touches Facebook, or some other permutation of those. And it maximizes your effort to be able to take a single thing, sort of tweak it slightly, and then repurpose it across all your different social network presences. It just means less work for you. It's consistent, and you're getting the word out to folks who might be on one or two of those networks, but not the others. The caveat is that something on, for example, on Facebook, if you just posted the picture, that's great, and people will be able to see it, and it looks really nice. But unless you have sort of a caption, and maybe a link to like a call to action, like learn more about this initiative on our blog, or send a letter to your local elected official about why these bike lanes are important here or something, you're really not maximizing the impact of that post. And whereas on Instagram, sort of just a simple description of what's going on there is really best. So absolutely repurpose across your networks. And then we'll also talk a bit at the end about how you can prioritize where your organizational emphasis goes when there are so many social networks to choose from.
Great. And we have a few questions that I think we can hold to a little bit later on that are more general across all, that might fit into that last section we're talking about. But one last question on this portion, Mary Lauren, is there any drawback to having periods of time of inactivity on Instagram? Thinking of Facebook, it's obvious there, and usually not wise to have long periods of not posting.
That's a great question. The Instagram algorithm, at least at the moment, doesn't penalize you for not posting in a steady stream. So I think that what the question asker is referencing, which is really astute, is that if you're on Facebook, if you use it really heavily in one week and you have a lot of follower engagement, but then the next week you post like one thing or you don't post anything at all, Facebook's algorithm kind of learns from that, and it might deprioritize your page posting in other people's feeds. So if you're kind of sporadic about your updates, you might not get as many eyeballs on the things that you're putting onto the site. For the moment, that's not true with Instagram. If you post a photo on Instagram and the people who are following you log on to their feeds, they're going to see your photo, and they're going to have to scroll through it. They're going to see it. That may well change given that Facebook owns Instagram, and they're experimenting with paid advertising on Instagram, and kind of having people see sponsored images in their feeds. But for now, you're not losing the future eyeballs of any of your existing followers if you don't post. That said, if you can be posting frequently, it's better for your image and for your brand, because you're sort of reminding people that you exist and that you're doing good work.
Great. Well, would you like to move on, Mary Lauren, to our next
Yes.
subject?
Let's move on. Our next network, yes, our next network is Tumblr. Okay, so this is going to be a pretty short section of the webinar, because Tumblr is kind of this interesting hybrid between your own website, or a website, and a social network. And I'll explain what that means. Tumblr is kind of like a mini blog. It's sort of like Blogger, but with more social sharing built in. It tends to be more short form, and it tends to be more image heavy. Um, a lot of GIFs or animated images that aren't video, but aren't just a static image, are generated on Tumblr. A lot of artists are on Tumblr. It's sort of very people tend to view it as a short form blog that they curate. Um, on Tumblr, a defining feature is reblogging, and a good way to think of it as is a good way to think of reblogging is that Tumblr reblogging for Tumblr is kind of like retweeting on Twitter. So if you put up, a series of images of bike to work day, and write out a description about how, thousands of people came out to bike to work day, and that represents like 72% growth since the year before, and isn't it great that everyone in DC or wherever you are is biking to work? And then someone who is following you on Tumblr decides that they like that post, they reblog it, and they might reblog it and add their own comment at the bottom of that blog. Um, and that's when you get more reblogs. That's the way to show that people are kind of appreciating what you are putting up and want to share it with their followers as well. Another thing that I didn't actually put in these bullets is that there's a like feature, much like Facebook and Instagram. On Tumblr, it looks like a little heart, and we'll go over and look at it in a moment. And that's another way to tell that you're kind of getting love from your followers. Some Tumblr blogs also have an ask feature that you can turn on and off pretty easily, and that's a way for people who stumble upon your Tumblr to kind of offer their comments. It doesn't go into a public forum. It kind of compiles in the back end where you can see them and then respond to them as you want. You can use Tumblr for producing content, which a lot of people do. You could also use it for curation, which also a lot of people do. So a lot of Tumblr blogs that you'll come across, they aren't actually original content. They're just sort of stuff that other people have put up, and then the Tumblr user is kind of sorting through those, finding things that they find engaging, and then reposting them. When you're making your Tumblr, you can also choose a theme, which is highly customizable. So they come in all different shapes and sizes. But the main sort of unit of Tumblr is the dashboard. And let's go ahead and over and take a look at that. So I'm on Tumblr. The Alliance for Biking and Walking actually isn't on Tumblr, but this is my personal Tumblr dashboard. So this is, like I said, this is the dashboard. All of the Tumblr blogs that I have chosen to follow, when they have a new post, it comes up here. So for example, The Atlantic has a Tumblr, and if we click on this, it'll take us to that Tumblr in a new window. So if I were to go to, theatlantic.tumblr.com, it would have this nice kind of plain theme, which sort of mirrors the Atlantic brand. And then they post a bunch of stories every day, which are kind of short versions of fuller Atlantic pieces. So you'll see here they almost always have an image, and they, because this is a media organization, they will take a bit of a clip of the article and then link to it so people can go ahead and read more. So on this individual post, you'll see that a bunch of people have liked it, a bunch of people have reblogged it. This person, Come Downstairs, has reblogged it and added a comment to it. So we can go click on that. So they've said, oh, that post from The Atlantic was interesting. I'm going to reblog this, and here's my commentary on this that I'll add to the bottom. All put together, you end up with a collection of curators and artists and commentators who are taking things that they find interesting, putting them in a format that they find visually appealing, and then maybe also adding their own spin and commentary to it. A few examples to start off with, if this is something that you're interested in looking at. Cycle Whatever is an initiative. It was actually a side project of a woman who works at the Washington Area Bicyclist Association. The idea is that there's this sort of popular thing called cycle chic, where people broadcast pictures of like beautiful women wearing everyday clothes on a bike, and this person wanted to showcase examples of people wearing whatever on a bike, and asked people to submit examples of that, and then compiled it on this Tumblr. Another side project that I thought was interesting is this is a fellow who bikes in New York City, and he decided that he would make a Tumblr that's focused exclusively on images of people of police cars parked in bike lanes to sort of draw attention to this problem. I think that Tumblr would be a great tool to use, especially if your organization is working on a side project. If it's something that's super image heavy, it could be really, really good to use. And if your organization doesn't yet have a website, you're kind of just getting off the ground and want to do something that's pretty easy, pretty customizable, and pretty user engagement focused, a Tumblr would be a really good place to start. And with that, let's turn back over to questions.
And again, folks, feel free to type your questions for Mary Lauren in our question line in your control panel.
Oops.
Okay, and we can come back to questions as we go along as well. So if something, oh, here we go. A couple just came in, Mary Lauren. From Jim, do you have a sense of what the demographics of Tumblr are?
That's a great question. I actually don't, but we can certainly include that. We can research that and include that in our report back about the webinar in a blog post afterwards. If I were to make, I'm going to go ahead and make a prediction. My hypothesis is that Tumblr demographics are young, for sure. I think that it's very popular among 20-somethings and among teens. You know, it's sort of the bloggers, people who would have been blogging 7 years ago are tumbling now.
Yeah, I also hypothesis. I would agree, Mary Lauren. I think it tends to be younger.
Yeah. We'll see if we're right.
Yeah, let's hope so. Another question here from Tom. Looking at the platforms Blogger, WordPress, and Tumblr, if you were just going to have one, which would you choose?
You know, it's a tough question. I think it depends on what your goals are. If it's just for a personal blog, if you want to be writing really longer analysis pieces, then maybe WordPress or Blogger would be best. I think more people tend to gravitate towards WordPress than Blogger, but I put those two on pretty equal footing in the sense that they're more traditional blogging platforms. I think if you want to do something that's more image heavy and more focused on social sharing, I would use Tumblr. If you're an advocacy organization and you're just starting up, and I think that an important thing to do is to get a website so you have a web presence so people can find out more about your organization online. And for a real robust organizational website, I think a Tumblr isn't sufficient. But if you have to start there before you get more resources and ramp up, then I think it can be a great place to start. And you know, if you have sort of custom questions about what you should use in your situation, I think I speak for both Liz and myself in that we'd be happy to talk that strategy over with you.
Absolutely. Um, and one other question we have here from Laura. Um, should we post our monthly blog on Tumblr? So I'm assuming Laura's organization, puts together a monthly roundup. Does it make sense to also cross-post that on Tumblr?
Yeah, I think it definitely makes sense. If you, so for example, the Alliance does, we do a blog post every week where we pull the most interesting things that are happening in biking and walking advocacy around North America, and we compile them in one blog post every week. And if we had a Tumblr, that's absolutely something that I would put onto the Tumblr as well. And if I had more time, I would probably even break up each of those items into its own Tumblr post. Um, I think it's important to make sure that it's visual. So much like the Atlantic does, make sure you have an image that corresponds either to the entire post or to each item within it.
Great. And I'm seeing a couple other questions, again, that are a little more general and kind of cut across all of these platforms. So I'm going to hold those until the end so we can tackle those um, from a more general point of view. So don't worry, we'll get back to you on that. We have about 20 minutes left, so I'm going to try and quickly go through our last two platforms, and then we'll answer as many questions as we can. And as Mary Lauren said, we're definitely both available afterward if we don't get a chance to answer your question. So at
Great.
this point, we can shift over to Pinterest. Um, so I will take control. All right. Okay, so like I said, we're running short on time, so I'll try and go through this quickly, but not skimp on the details. Our third platform we're talking about today is Pinterest. The league has just started to dip our toes in Pinterest. And it is also a very photo-centric platform. It is organized via pin boards, so kind of, thinking like you have a cork board in your office or in your bedroom. It's that idea, but virtual. And those pin boards are organized around themes or different affinities and groups. And as Mary Lauren said on Tumblr, the actions you can take are to like or reblog a post. On Pinterest, you would repin or pin a post on your boards. And you can also like with the heart function. And we'll take a look in just a moment at what this looks like online. Um, so you also build a following. You follow users and their pin boards. So you can follow all of a user's pin boards. You can have as many pin boards as you want. So you can follow all of the Alliance's pin boards or just their pin board on their campaign on XYZ in your community. There are also boards that are more collaborative in nature. Those the user makes it a group board, and that means you can add users to give them permission to post. So those people can pin as they will. Some have thousands of members, some just a few. So that's more of another way to sort of share information beyond just pinning and repinning and liking. And Pinterest also is interesting in that it often links out to other websites. So this has actually seen a lot of traction in terms of retail. Interestingly enough, there have been studies that show Pinterest has pushed a lot of commerce to online retailers. So if we want to hop onto um, whoops, onto our browser here. So this is our Women Bike profile page. And you can see here we have our boards. We have 3 so far. We're still, like I said, dipping our toes in. And this is one that we created ourselves, our Women Bike Advocacy Board. So you can see here we have a lot of different tidbits and factoids and just nice images that people can share and pin on their own boards. So this would be one pin. You can see sort of promoting our National Women's Bicycling Forum that's coming up. So folks who are going to it or are interested in spreading the word can pin that on their boards and let their followers know what's happening. As you can also see, you can like the image, and if there is a website that it links out to, that would also be clickable right there as well. So moving back to sort of the demographics of Pinterest, you may have already heard that Pinterest is very the main demographic is women. So almost 3/4 of its users are women, and the main age group within its total users is between 30 and 49. And like Mary Lauren said in the previous 2 sections on Instagram and Tumblr, those trend young. Pinterest, not so much. It's more a bit of an older set. And the spread among urban, suburban, and rural environments is pretty equal. So there's not a specific area in which more users are using Pinterest. So I just pulled up the one board here is our Women Bike Advocacy, so that you can see the Women Bike profile. We can add pins as we like. This is not a group board, so just I would be able to add pins here. Here's another example of a pin that is on the bicycle art board. So this is a group board that people can add to. This is a bikey face comic here on how to put your light on a bike, where the best place to do that. So this was uploaded to that group board not too long ago, and we can pull that up. So here we have the bike art group. So you can see there are some rules there. And then Pinterest has a tiled theme. So images sort of just overlaid along a few rows. And so you can add a description, like and share. This is the general view on Pinterest. So in terms of bike advocacy, Georgia Bikes, I wanted to highlight, they have a great Pinterest account and a few great boards. Pull them up here. So you can see they're involved in a few different groups, including Bike Savannah. That makes sense. They're also in the bike art board, and then they also have their own bike advocacy board, and they have a couple gendered boards as well, sort of playing on the demographics of Pinterest. So you can see through here their bike advocacy board. Here again is that Bikey Face comic. They mostly have some infographics and some artwork that sort of tell a story based on the overall theme of bike advocacy. And then that will be the end on Pinterest. Does anyone have any questions more generally on that social network?
I don't think we have any Pinterest questions in yet. Folks, feel free to type them in to the question panel. One question here, and then let's move on in the interest of time. Any suggestions, Liz, about how to find interesting places or folks to follow on Pinterest?
Yeah, so I think it's kind of similar to what Mary Laura mentioned earlier when you're building up these usership and followers, is just following a lot of people and a lot of different boards. So start with people that you're aware of and start kind of looking at what they're following. So, if you start following 5 people looking at what boards they have and where they're repinning from. So you can really sort of snowball from there. That would be my first suggestion.
Great. And we do have a couple other questions, but just in the interest of time, how about we keep on going and then see how many we can get to at the end?
That sounds great. Yeah, so our last social network here we'll be talking about is Vine. Um, and somewhat similar to Instagram in that it is smartphone dependent, and you would upload via mobile phone. But Vine is video specific, so it is only 6-second looping videos that you can upload and view. So it's very similar to Instagram in its feed presentation. As you follow users, their videos appear in your feed as they're uploaded, scrolling up and down. You can like and revine. So again, very similar uh, terminology in terms of interaction on these social networks. Um, they also allow for tagging of videos similar to Twitter and Instagram. So if you upload your Bike to Work Day video, you can do hashtag Bike to Work Day. And users will be able to click on that hashtag and take them to an aggregate of all videos that have been recently uploaded with that tag. And it also shares well with Twitter and Facebook. So sort of the overall theme, I think, of this is that cross-pollination is a good thing, especially with these social networks that are kind of secondary in terms of Twitter and Facebook. Being able to use these for, especially Vine and Instagram, I think interaction with Twitter and Facebook is really helpful. So I'll just pull up a few examples here. So I just looked at the Ciclavia hashtag here. So just 6-second looping video of a user who uploaded her time at Ciclavia. Very simple, just kind of a pretty day riding their bikes. We have a couple more here that I'll just run through quickly. So this is one that I uploaded on Bike to Work Day. So you can see here that I've used the hashtag Bike to Work Day 13 so people can find it. This was at our Bike League booth in Washington, D.C. So pretty simple stuff. Just kind of giving atmosphere, letting people know what's going on in D.C. on Bike to Work Day. Similarly here, we have one from Nellie Pearson, who works for the Washington Area Bicyclists Association. She had the same idea, Bike to Work Day at another location in the city. So just some scenes at their station that they were hanging out at. Lots of happy people on bikes. And then we have a couple here, one from Mary Lawrence, a little more humorous, sort of how to offer your turning hand signals a little more fancily. And then lastly, I will leave you with my favorite Vine of all time that just, I think, was uploaded today or yesterday. Michelle Obama dunking the Miami Heat. So as you can see, Vine, I think, generally is a little more irreverent. It can be used with more specific aims. I know USA Today often vines its front page, so it will pull together a video of the top stories of the day. People can get a quick look at that. But there's also a lot of fun stuff you can do with Vine as well, the looping videos. So this is how it looks on the browser. It really is very much smartphone dependent. You can look at it via browser, but it's a little clunkier, and then definitely using your phone is the way to go. So let me run back, and I think that is it on Vine. If anyone has any quick questions there.
And if folks have questions about Vine, go ahead and type them into the question box there. And I'll note also that so on the webinar, the videos come through a little bit grainy, and I think in most of them it was hard to hear the audio, which was true with the Instagram video that I showed too. But just so folks know, it's an actual client. It's a pretty clear picture, and comes through as a really fluid video.
Absolutely, and definitely be posting these links and slides as well for you all to take a look after the fact.
Yeah, and vines are fun too because they're embeddable in a blog post, so we'll definitely include the vines that Liz referenced. Let's see. We have a question about the demographics for Vine. Liz, do you know about that, or is that another, look into
Yeah,
that and research it?
that's another one that I'm not sure of off the top of my head. Vine is another newer social network, so I'm not sure how much has actually been looked at in terms of its demographics, but I would again guess that it skews younger, um, uh, and more of the teens and early 20 set. But I'll be certain to double check that and include it in our roundup.
Great. How about we move on to that last section there, and then if we have a couple more minutes, we can do more questions.
Sounds great.
Cool. So on this last, I just wanted to take a few minutes to talk about how you can possibly decide where to focus your energies when all these different social networks exist and they all have their good sides and their bad sides. And there's an answer to that, which is you can't be everywhere. You can't do everything. I mean, especially if you're in a biker pedestrian advocacy organization, you have limited staff time and limited capacity, and you can only do so many things. So you've got to do what's strategic for you and for your organization and for what you're trying to do. Look at how much time having a presence on a certain social network will cost you, and then what the benefits of being on that social network are. Consider your overall goals as an organization and a campaign. Consider your audience. Consider your staffing capacity. If you're an organization that exclusively does education within high schools, then maybe a blog isn't that worth your time, because maybe you're seeing that high schoolers aren't reading blogs, but they are on Instagram all the time. So maybe you want to be on Instagram, and not put as much energy into a blog. And then if you do decide that a certain social network is going to be something worth experimenting with, start small. Find a person who can be the manager of it and who has some freedom to play around with it and see what's working. Then prioritize listening, following other people and seeing what people are posting about, seeing what types of stuff people tend to like and people tend to engage with, and dip your toe in the water of trying to post some of your own stuff, see what works well, see what's not working, and then assess whether it's the right direction to be going in. I mean, there's no harm in testing something out and then deciding it's not a great fit.
Great.
Yeah.
So there was one question I wanted to get back to, Mary Lauren. This is from Maria. Kind of cuts across all of them, these social networking platforms. Do you recommend an editorial calendar or a general plan for sharing content to balance out the fun/light material versus the advocacy-heavy messaging? Or should content be more spontaneous and go with the flow?
I think that's a great question. So at the Alliance, we find it really useful to have a general communications calendar that houses everything about when your big webinars are going to happen or when your big events are going to happen and what communications need to happen in correspondence with those different events. If a new report is going to be coming out, that should be on the calendar. Anytime research comes out or you have something that's going to be important for your communications, to have that be on that calendar. And I think that whenever it makes sense, that content associated with those big milestones should be posted across your other social networks. I think that, I think that it could work in a lot of different ways for different organizations, but my instinct would be to say that, start with the by calendaring out the big bones of kind of your communications program. These are the reports we're going to be putting out. These are the different research projects that we're going to be writing about. We're going to be doing at least one substantive post every week, or two a week, or every other week, or what have you. And then let the fun and irreverent stuff kind of filter in between those big rocks. Because a feed, if it's just really dry stuff, it's not all that interesting. And if it's just really irreverent stuff, then people might wonder, what the substance is of what you do. Um, so I think the calendaring can work in different ways for different people, but yeah, try calendaring out the kind of big content and then let the fun stuff be around it.
Um, Thinking it makes sense to maybe have one more question, and I think this is sort of encapsulates um, sort of the undertone of this webinar, and that is, how do you keep from being overwhelmed with the amount of time that posting and keeping up with these different social media networks takes every day? Sort of, how do you find a balance? Um, Marilyn, do you want to take a first stab at that one?
Yeah, and I'd love to hear your take too, Liz. I think that the simple answer is you can't do it all. So you have to decide where you're going to be, decide what your posting frequency is going to be to those networks, and then set yourself boundaries. Like, I'm going to do this for 20 minutes every other day, or I'm going to do this for an hour once a week, and schedule all my stuff, on Twitter or what have you. And then I'm not going to look at Twitter for the rest of the week, or I'm just going to look at it for 20 minutes in the morning every day, and give yourself those clear boundaries so that you don't go overboard. What would you say?
Yeah, I agree. I think with social media in general, it can be your worst enemy or your greatest ally in terms of being a time suck, or an amazing way and simple way to leverage your message and to really build a campaign. So I think it really, it's not rocket science, but it certainly is good to have a certain perspective on who you're trying to reach and why you're trying to reach them. Certainly, I will be posting the demographics of these, and I think that should be sort of a sign to a certain extent as to what you want to be involved in and what you want to spend your time on. Because we
Mm-hmm.
know everyone is working very hard and they are limited amount of hours in the day. So I think being strategic about what you want to let people know about, and where you want to let them know is important to figure out before you decide to make 10 different accounts on 10 different platforms. Well, they can be fun, of course, but it's certainly it's good to take a strategic approach.
Definitely. Um, cool. Well, this has been great. Thanks everybody for joining us. I'm sorry that we didn't get to all of the questions. We kind of jammed a whole bunch of different stuff into one webinar. But we'll take a look back over those, and make sure that we're covering outstanding issues in our summary blog post. And you can look for that blog post over at bikeleague.org and peoplepoweredmovement.org. And we'll post the slides and a recording of this webinar.
Great. And thanks again for everyone for tuning in. Everyone was very engaged. We appreciate all the questions. Certainly, Mary Lauren and I have some homework to do as well. So thank you for tuning in, and please be sure to keep your eye out for future webinars. I think we have a few planned. So thank you again, and thanks to Mary Lauren for sharing all that information.
Thanks, Liz.
All right, thanks everybody.